Hello, I'm Odin, and today I'm gonna finish the knees, I'm gonna make the tail, and I'm gonna wear my 1974 Mechagodzilla cosplay. Ah, the tail, the final major piece I need to make Mechagodzilla. Now, people have been asking me, how are you gonna make it move? Isn't it gonna be really heavy with all those flexible joints inside? Well, the truth is, Mechagodzilla's tail never moves in the original movie. It's a single piece with no articulation. In fact, in most scenes, they obscure his tail and hardly ever show it. And then there's the secondary flying version of Mechagodzilla. And the tail is in a different position for those shots in the movie. But that tail also doesn't move, because the flying version is a lightweight hollow prop meant to be suspended on wires. And it is also very different in length and shape, but we're not supposed to notice that. My tail will be made to look like the suit version. Once I have the tail done, then I'm gonna paint it. I fixed the pelvis a couple of videos ago, but I held off on painting that and the legs until after I got the tail finished. But I did start on the tail pattern when I made the pelvis. I had scaled the profile picture to be my size and traced the plates with Inkscape. Then I knew what size the side plates needed to be. But the parts that wrap around the top, the angled plates, those I was not able to really figure out without just seeing what I needed to work with. So I couldn't just figure out this shape on paper, which was unfortunate, because if I got in a computer file that would work, Max Kirkland was happy to help me laser cut the foam pieces on the giant laser cutting machines that they have at the Dallas Makerspace. And TNT Cosplay is nearby. I could just order my phone from TNT and Max could have just picked it up and then easily cut out all the parts I wanted in just a few minutes. Except I couldn't visualize the pieces flatten out like the way they are on paper, separate from everything else. I really needed to touch them to be able to figure out how they worked. So it's actually best for me just to cut each one out from 4mm HD foam. It was still cumbersome to get each segment correct, mostly because I was trying to cut from minimal pieces. All right, that's starting to look more like what I want. That's the beginning of a tail. That's section 1. I've only got 14 more to make. These are all getting smaller, right? They'll get easier. I print out the next segment and continue with figuring out the segment shapes, tracing the paper pattern and cutting more foam, and gluing the new parts in place. It was not fitting the way I was expecting, and then I realized why.
I messed that up. I got the angle completely wrong. No wonder. I put the angle on backwards.
On segment 2, I started to make the top sections separately, and I still needed to fiddle with each one. As I moved my way through the tail segments, I realized the best way was just to cut the side panel based on my drawings. And I added an inch of overlap so I knew where I needed to glue, and how the plates would need to line up, which would get me the correct curve on the tail. I made a ruler from 4mm foam, which I used to measure the top sections. It took 3 or 4 completed sections before I really saw the basic pattern I needed to follow. In the end, I just cut out the side patterns exactly as they look on the drawing, but added a little from the previous plate. And when I traced the pattern onto the foam, I also marked the center of each of the big rivets that will go onto the tail. And I added pencil marks on the inside of the foam, which let me know where to put the glue for the next new piece, which is what got me the right curve. I used a scrap piece of foam on the table while gluing to be sure that the previous section was flat. One of the nice things about this build is that the tail is a repeated pattern. It's 14 nearly identical segments plus a 15th end piece. Each segment just gets a little smaller. But one of the challenges of this build is that the tail is a repeated pattern. 14 nearly identical segments that slightly rotate and change angles, and the sides need to be glued together flat or the tail is going to warp. The 15th segment has a different end, and it's just kind of flat. And I needed to trim the ends to make them match up. It was really difficult to keep the sides glued perfectly as I moved down the tail. When I added the top and bottom plates to the end, I made sure the lines all kind of connected with the side plate that I first put on. I cut a teardrop shape of floor mat foam just to bulk up the end.
Yeah, that's fine.
believe it or not, that's all the base of the tail is. It's just the stub and it's flat. However, there is a round circle here, like a little rocket thruster or something. So I'm gonna cut a disc out of this and layer in a couple little pieces to add to a little bit of texture to the end of the tail, but that's it. I made a mechanical shrimp. All right. I am Shrimp Man. Or the Terminator Mac the Night, one or the other. I use the CosTool circle cutter to make a ring to be the rocket thruster circle detail that goes onto the floor mat foam. And then I pinned the end of the tail to some scrap foam so I could cut a circle out of it as well. The pins kept the floor mat piece from moving as I cut it. And then I cut a series of smaller circles out of scrap foam to get just a little more detail, each hole getting a little bit smaller. And once it's all glued together, it looks pretty good to me. Now this is one detail I was not able to get good reference images of. I got inspiration from the toy and kind of went from there. I glued the cap in place, but because these parts completely fit inside of each other, I went ahead and placed them with wet contact cement.
All right.
And I know in a lot of past videos I've said, don't just put the glue on and stick it together because it doesn't work that way. Well, it doesn't work that way. But what I want to do is get it close to where I want it to be because this is such a funky inside fit. I'm going to stick it together like this, give it a chance to dry, and then I'll mash the ends together. And then I'll come back with a Dremel and clean up the edges. But for now, that's all I wanted to do for the tail. While the glue sets, I can start on the tail fin. I printed a full-size version, and I cut it up so I could modify the curve to match my actual physical tail. And then cut the fin from some 1.5 inch thick, heavy-duty kneeling pad foam. The fin is actually longer than the foam, so I glued an additional piece and then completed the shape. Once the fin is cut out, I marked the center of the foam and then set the table on my bandsaw to 45 degrees. And if I keep the blade cutting right along that center line, I can cut a 45 bevel onto each side, which gets me the sharp edge of the tail fin. I cut all the edges just like this, except for the one side where I'm going to be gluing it to the tail. The kneeling pad has a texture burnt into the side of it. I sand the texture off with my belt sander so the sides are smooth. The top of the tail has a peak. It's not flat, so I need to cut a deep groove into the fin. And I just cut this by hand, assuming a 45-degree angle. Close enough is going to be good enough for this. The groove fits over the top of the tail, and the fin can be glued in place with contact cement. The contact cement has set up, and now I can close the seams and clean up the edges around the edge of the tail. There are more spines to add to the tail, 11 more, and all of them are going to be cut from kneeling pad foam. But I don't have to sand these because they're all thinner, so I can just cut the texture off the sides. And I make them slightly different thicknesses, so the smallest spine is the thinnest. With all the spines cut out, I mark the center lines on each spine and cut the edges to look sharp, just like the big fin. I labeled each fin with an arrow that shows which way is up, pointing towards the head. And the center three need to have the groove cut into them so they can fit over the tail. Ooh, that was about the best one I've done. Okay. With all the spines ready, I pencil mark their placement on the tail and use contact cement to stick them all on. I've got one last big little detail that I really want to get done for the tail. Every one of these holes that I went through and poked with that pokey thingy, I need to cover those with a hemisphere. So I'm going to be cutting up a whole bunch of little tiny cat toys. No, they're just 25mm EVA foam dowel balls. So I'll be cutting those kind of in half and gluing them over each of the dots. So I get to cut up a bunch of little EVA foam balls now. I don't really need exactly half of each rivet. I'll just cut 6mm off of each side. Well, you know, it's a sphere, they don't have sides. So I turn them over to get 2 rivets from one EVA foam ball. Then all 28 rivets were glued right over their pencil mark, 14 for each side. I still really like the big rivet look that this guy has. We got the tail done. I I always like the tail. I really like the fact that for a kaiju and for a Godzilla Toho style kaiju, the tail is this short. That was very much appealing to me, and for one of the reasons why I decided to do this particular monster, or one of the benefits of doing this particular, I wanted to just do Mechagodzilla because I like Mechagodzilla. I'm not gonna lie. I really didn't know how to go about making the tail. I mean, that's pretty common for me. There's a piece that I might know how I'm gonna do, and in this case with the tail, it was this little chevron here. It's like, okay, I know how I can make that piece. I'm not really sure how I can get the rest. And then it was like, well, I can cut these out of the kneeling pad foam. Let's all put the tail off till later. And then I kind of thought about it some, and I even asked Max Kirkland at the Dallas Makerspace. I emailed him and said, hey, if I figure out my pattern on the computer, can I send you a file and you just laser cut all the parts? Because I don't want to cut all these parts out. He was so eager to do it, he kept reminding me that I hadn't sent him the file yet. This went back and forth for a couple of months. Max, if you're watching, thank you so very much. I really appreciate all your help. I'm sorry that mentally I just couldn't figure out how to draw this out in 2D in order to get the 3D part that I wanted without just doing it in 3D. So, I did it. Now I get to cover it with black Plasti-Dip and actually finish up my kaiju. This is pretty cool. This should be the last major body part that I need. I can add more stuff. I can always add in the blinky red light that goes in the chest. I can add in other little effects and stuff, but I don't have to have any of that. With this, all the parts I have to have are finished, but they need to be painted. The entire thing was sprayed with Plasti-Dip. For the final color, I will use silver acrylic paint, and I need to thin the paint by mixing 50% paint and 50% window cleaner. Mix it up thoroughly without adding a bunch of foam into it. And then I just spray it with my touch-up gun, which is kind of like a larger airbrush, but it's a lot easier for me to use. And I mixed up enough paint that I could spray the tail, and I could spray all 4 of the leg pieces, plus both of the feet, and I needed to touch up the arms. Then Joe used his airbrush to darken the panel lines and kind of force the shadows, which is what they kind of did with the original suit for the movie, because you can easily see it in the early production photos, the photos of when the suit was being revealed. But by the time production was happening, it looks like all the suit repairs and the repaints that they needed to do to the suit because of filming, you know, fighting Godzilla, well, they painted over all the airbrush work, and Mecha just kind of looks solid silver in the movie. But Joe was able to get everything airbrushed just before we started setting up for this year's SacAnime convention. I have some display space at the con, and we got to set up as cosplay first aid for this convention, which gave me a chance to do some first aid on Mechagodzilla, because I still needed to attach the Velcro strips to the foam pieces on the inside of the legs. This is how I'm going to be connecting all of the foam accordion pieces to all of the foam parts of the suit. And I needed a little bit of soldering repair to the wires for the eyes. And then I was able to finally suit up in full Mechagodzilla for the first time. The pelvis and the tail are held up with straps. And the tail is currently attached with drywall screws. Don't worry, the pointy ends of the screws are going into the tail away from me. I had glued in some big blocks of foam just to do this. I'm gonna modify it and make it a better attachment later. And the arms are attached to the chest with a pair of adjustable straps. I make them loose so we can get the chest on. But then I need an assistant to tighten up the straps, which pulls the fabric and the accordion pieces back into place. The back spines still attach the way they should, with Velcro, but I did make them a little too big. So the center spines of the chest and the center spines of the belt, well, they overlap and hit each other. So I'm gonna need to fix that as well. The hands, those are easy. They just slip inside of the sleeve and I can hold on to the inner handles. Now the fingers, they don't move on my hands because they never did in the movies, but I can turn them. And the head just fits over my head like a big helmet. Now it can fall off, but that's kind of good because if I really hit something, the head will fall off and let go and I won't hurt my neck. And I can see out of the neck, which is covered with a magnetized panel that looks like an air conditioning vent. And as soon as I get it all on, people were waiting, it's picture time. I had helped Midna reattach parts to her helmet just before I finished doing Mechagodzilla. Loki, Roadhog, and Bakugo were a lot of fun to talk to. I had helped Roadhog with her anchor just the day before. And then Joe, J. Period, and myself were all off to the con floor. I visit my friend Princess Squib at her booth. And I wanted to get a new monster shirt from Cryptid Zoo.
Oh, it's Mechagodzilla, that's awesome.
This one is of the fairy monster attacking Embarcadero in San Francisco. And I wanted to stop by my friend Scott Zillner's booth.
Stop eating my hair.
It's weird seeing it in person. I've only seen it on YouTube. Yeah.
You gotta be quick. I gotta get him upstairs.
You gotta get back upstairs. Last photo.
One good thing is I fit through the convention doors. But escalators, they're never gonna work. And stairs aren't really gonna work either.
So elevator's open. So duck.
But if I duck just a little, I can fit in a normal elevator. Not many more people will fit in behind me, but I can stand in the corner and my tail goes to the other corner. Mecha always needs to duck in an elevator.
Go forward. Go forward. Duck. Sorry.
And I'm back on the third floor where my booth is. I love being in the Mechagodzilla suit, and I plan to wear it for a few more cons. As the parts wear out, I can replace them because everything is just attached with Velcro. And I will be the cosplay repair booth at SacAnime for all the upcoming cons. So if you're ever at this show, you know where you can find me. And for the next couple of years, Mechagodzilla will be on display as well, and I'll try and wear them. Now, I do plan on getting a couple of things changed, like I talked about before. Plus, I still need to get the mouth to work the way I want it to. And I want to make the chest laser light up, but that's all going to happen later.
I've got the one pull the thing off.
Chin straps and face masks do not work. It's so nice to finally wear this. It's a heck of a lot of fun. And I'm really, really happy I have a full Mechagodzilla suit. Now I'm gonna be wearing this again soon. I know that there's lots of different ways that you can sweat so much that you soak your clothes, but this is how Odin sweats.
It's okay. I am a man with a plan. And you are duck. Duck. Perfect.
You are. So, okay, so rotate. Rotate. You're good. Okay. All right. Wow, that's amazing. You are inches away from the top. Like, you weren't even inches away from the top of the entrance to the elevator. Like, you were almost scraping.
Excuse me. Yeah? Before we get started, does anybody want to get out?
I want to thank Cobbed Corn, Star Bunny, Commander Darklight, and all of my Patreon supporters. Patreon members at the $5 and above level get access to my private Discord, which includes weekly games with me, prop-related chat, and early access to live streams. My Patreon support is the #1 thing that makes this show possible. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe. Have an idea for something for me to make? Please leave a comment below. And if you make any of these projects, you can send me a picture.